Chris Corsini is one of the most awe-inspiring and powerful forces of nature I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. Watching him work is unlike anything else you'll ever see as he integrates American Sign Language, astrology, tarot card reading, and musicianship into a pure expression of channeling mastery. In this podcast, we take a deep dive into his spiritual and entrepreneurial path as we chat about his rapid rise to fame and all the wildness surrounding coming into your full power as a channel and entrepreneur. If you haven't encountered Chris Corsini before, you are in for a treat, discovering what it really means to put yourself out there and embrace all of your gifts. So, okay, what areas of study do you pull from when it comes to where you pull your truth around astrology? Is it like, are there certain schools that you pull from, or like where did you learn this information? Like, what is the source of truth for you?
Yeah, I think, well, truth is a loaded word. I don't think there's really any truth. There's always my truth, your truth, and the total truth, or whatever, you know what I mean? So that is a mixed bag for sure. But I find that what really got me to where I am with astrology was just me diving into like as much content as I could from like trusted astrologers. So Jane Tarot, for example, is an astrologer on YouTube. She also does tarot readings, and she works the tarot and the astrology together, much like myself. And she's fucking awesome. There's different astrology schools, podcasts that I just basically consume. Dr. Lennox is a really good guy. He does like red robe astrology on Instagram. I share him a lot. And basically you just begin to understand the archetypes of each planet and how they interact, and then how those interactions with other planets affect us when they're in specific places in the sky, which would be the area of the sky that represents Aries, for example. So that's the first house in modern day astrology. So if you have like a Mercury retrograde in the first house, Mercury rules the thoughts, the ideas, how we process, how we communicate. Retrograde is reflection, going back, review, reassessment, reestablishing connections. And then you look at the first house, which is about ego and who I am and how I show up. So a lot of conversations around those themes. And it kind of, I compare it to like the weather. Like you can look at where a cold front is coming in, and you know, the wind from the east and the temperature of this, right, and the precipitation, and that creates an environment, and that environment has an effect on the earth. That is weather patterns. The exact same thing is with astrology. It's like or I guess it's astronomy as well, but like it's the planets connecting with each other in an area, and that has a very specific current that it invites energetically into the collective. And just like weather, if you look at the history of weather patterns, which is the history of astrology, there is very specific themes that come up with those combinations of things. So just understanding it from that realm, as opposed to like, I don't believe in astrology. You don't have to believe in astrology. Astrology is real, and it is there, and it is affecting you like the weather. So like, do you believe in the sun? Do you believe in wind? Like, what do you mean? It's like, it's the same thing, babe, just energetically speaking. But yeah, so I've kind of just consumed as much as I can from people that I respect. And then you understand that Mars represents something specific, Saturn, and over time you develop the language and the understanding of how it weaves together. And then watching it personally in my life, especially because I do a lot of shadow work, I meditate a lot. I'm very connected to my higher self. I'm very connected to my guides and the energies around me. And that's all influenced by things like astrology and the collective energies. So watching those interactions manifest on a micro level in my life, and then on a macro level collectively sort of reinforces the belief system. And it makes me be like, oh, wow, I see where the dots are connecting. And then it allows you to just make better decisions based off the direction you're moving in, right?
Yeah, I also like how you give the planets archetypes and also the movements. Right. Archetype, like when something's in retrograde, it goes a certain way. Are there any other archetypes, like if you're getting into astrology, people should be aware of besides the planets and the movements?
Again, see, this is where I kind of put my foot in my mouth when people then ask me those types of questions, because I'm like, I'm not like a trained quote unquote astrologer. So like I could connect you with somebody who could probably answer that better than myself. But I do know that like a planet moving direct versus a planet stationing retrograde versus a planet moving in retrograde are going to have three very different effects on you, on your psyche, on your experience, and on the manifestation of what's happening around you. And then that movement, depending on the planet, is going to affect you in a specific, unique way. And then that planet associated with other planets, whether it's in a square, which is tension, or a conjunction, which is like an initiation point, or an opposition, which is tension, or a trine, which is a positive influence. It's like there's different ways to look at it all, and it all definitely has its own way of affecting us. But to answer your question, like at this point, I don't even really remember the question, and I don't think I could answer it very well anyways, to be honest.
So one thing you spoke to was tarot and astrology, and that you interweave the two. I'm curious which one of those came first for you, and how do you currently see the relationship between those two things?
Right. I think tarot came first for me. I would say they emerged, honestly, probably like around the same time, truthfully. I was always into like, oh, it's a full moon. And I could tell that like, there was like people in my life who were nurses, and they would say things like, oh, on the full moon, like people get fucking crazy. And like the emergency room is like busier on a full moon than not, which even that type of correlation I just found interesting. But I think they kind of emerged at the same time. Where I began to really have the crossover was understanding that like the Lover's card, for example, represents Gemini and therefore is tied to Mercury, Gemini's ruling planet. So when the Lover's card comes up, I'm not only thinking about like, ooh, love, you're going to fall in love, which is like such a limited way to look at the card, but it also is a point of choice. It is a fork in the road. It is divine connection. It is connecting with another person to have sort of like fated, life-altering conversations that are going to create a brainstorming effect that will open your perspective to seeing things in a different way. And all of that is directly tied to like mercurial energy. So when I pull the Lover's card now, I'm looking at it with all of these different layers, and then depending on the aspecting cards. So if I pull 5 cards and that's the center card, the Lovers is in the middle, I look to the right, and if there's an ace of coins, then I'm going to say, okay, this connection might be a brainstorm that leads you into investing your time, energy, money into something that creates a really stable structure that could be like a launch point for like a new product or a business. Whereas if it's a King of Wands reversed on the other side, oh, maybe you're thinking about moving forward with this connection, but you're hesitant because this person doesn't have enough drive or enough passion. So you're thinking, is this a good person to like, hop in bed with? Figuratively and literally, maybe. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I love how you integrate both to let your higher self speak to you. Mm-hmm. It's wonderful that you're blending the astrology with the tarot to bring things through. I mean, is there any other elements you use when you're doing your channeling work?
I find as like a real true channeler that they bring forward a lot of, I say they being my guides or whomever I'm connecting with on the other side, they bring forward a lot of personal life experiences into my work. So I'll pull some cards, and it's kind of like I find the golden thread, and then I grab it. And as I start to unravel it, it grows and grows and grows into this story that I'm now creating, or that I'm now telling to the audience or the person I'm working with or whatever. And as that is unfolding, I'm thinking about like Mars is in retrograde right now. So how is that going to affect these people? I'm also thinking about the cards that are in front of me and what that represents based on archetype, based on the aspecting cards, based on the picture as a whole. But then separate from that, as I'm describing something, I will typically either see somebody, I'll have a distant memory, or I'll have just this knowing of like an external friend or family member or lover or ex-lover or something. And like, as I start being presented with that person, as their energy starts to enter my field, it'll bring a story that that person has either told me or that that person has experienced or that that person is struggling with or is ecstatic about or whatever. And as that energy is starting to move into my space, I find myself very often kind of like laying all my shit out on the table in front of an audience. And it's when I get that raw with people and basically I'm just like airing out my own dirty laundry. Those are the readings where the comments, people are like, the level of specifics that you are getting into is fucking mind blowing. And it's because I or someone close to me has either experienced it personally or like third hand, I've received this information in detail and I'm being given that story to share to some degree while working all these other factors into it. But it's like, I'm almost stepping into Nick, for example, and being like, well, we're not going to get into any stories right now, but yeah, I would just, XYZ happened to me and I would tell it like you were telling it to me when you told it to me. And it's just giving that raw data to people is like what comes to me, but also what I find is most well received with people being just like literally mind blown with like, how did you know that person or that name or like the situation is just too specific. And I'm like, yeah, because it happened to me, babe, or it happened to Nick, or it happened to Joe or whatever. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
Yeah, even what you were pulling on with your example, I'm like, is he fucking talking about me?
I was like, oh shit.
And see, maybe I was. Yeah, like that wasn't even intentional. It just, that's what channeling is though, is when you just are open to what comes through and you need to also, I've had a really hard time with getting out of my own way with trying to understand where it's going, which is just like, I think mirrors life in general. We all get in our own way when we want to take control of the path and we want to take control of where we're going. And I think that there's a level of, yes, we're required to show up in certain ways at certain times, but a lot of it is just like blind trust. You know what I mean? So I start talking about something, and this happened in a workshop recently where I was just like, oh my God, why am I talking about like a fig? And I started talking about this fig and I'm like, I don't know anything about figs. So where the fuck is it? And then I almost stopped, but I just kept talking. And then eventually like a minute and a half, which is a long time to talk about something you don't know where it's going. Like a minute and a half later, it looped back and it all connected and made sense. And like everybody at the workshop was like, oh my God, like, wow, that really clicked for me. And I was like, me too, thank God. It's like, I didn't know where the fuck we were going.
And when you're doing the channeling work, do you feel like you speed up or slow down?
If you watch my channeling on YouTube, you will see that there are times where I talk at this speed, which is more strategic and intentional with the words that I'm choosing, because I think it's important to deliver words in a very intentional way, especially when you're working with such a vulnerable audience. Not that everyone I work with is vulnerable, but there's a lot of people who are like hanging on to every word. So you need to be careful with what you give them. So I try to be intentionally slower when I speak so that I can have that level of like safety and care in what I'm delivering. But then there are times where I'll get a message and I'm like, oh God, here we go. And then it just starts and it is like high speed download chatting where it's like, and it comes out. And then when it's finished, I'm monitoring it as my human self being like, oh my God, like make sure you're using the right words, because like we also live in such a like PC climate that's like, you want to be really careful about what you say and how you describe people and stuff like that. I had a really uncomfortable word. And that's the thing. The guides don't always necessarily know what is PC at this point in time. You know what I mean? So they were giving me, see, I even feel uncomfortable saying it now. It's not the worst word ever, but like, it was just like a weird concept about like ownership over humans. And I was like, I don't want to say that word. It wasn't the worst word that you're probably thinking of, but it was just, yeah, I was just like, oh, I don't want to say that. And then I kind of had to like pause myself from that quick paced flow to actually like, there's footage of this on YouTube of me being like, I'm not saying that. And I have like a side conversation. And then like 40 seconds later, they give me a different concept. And I'm like, okay, that I will describe because that's easier. And people aren't going to be like, I can't believe you said that. You know what I mean? So yeah, sometimes in that fast paced environment, I have to just like, whoa. I'm not going to say that. Like we're living in 2022. Like I can't use that word right now. You know what I mean? So Yeah, the speed is dependent on a few things.
Yeah, it's like that balance of seeing as it come through and also making sure it's contextually received.
Right. Yeah. And you don't want to use language that is either so triggering or so not confrontational, but so
controversial.
Controversial, thank you. You don't want to use language that is so triggering or controversial that people are going to lose the message and lose the point of information that you're trying to share because they're caught up on the language. And like as humans, we are so obsessed over language, especially right now in this like age of information. So yeah, you really kind of got to keep it cute and simple. And I think that's also just like what works really well for me and the guides that I work with and the people that connect with me is that like nothing I talk about is, I would say 90% of what I talk about is not too esoteric and like fancy lingo and like woo woo. Like it's all pretty much just like me telling you how it is in this simple layman's terms, which I think is received well.
Yeah. And how has it been for you? Because I mean, I've watched you blow up over the last year. I mean, you went from like, I think when I met you, maybe like 200K on Instagram to almost now 500,000. How has it been navigating like this, all these new eyeballs on you, especially like in the environment that we're in where everybody wants something like PC cookie cutter. And I know you're so not like you're the most raw person I know.
Yeah. I've definitely had to watch myself just with, and not that I ever really said anything that was crazy or that I have like, I don't have anything to hide. Like I'm not a sexist person. I'm not a racist person. I'm not somebody who's trying to take advantage of people. Like I really am just like a good guy. Like truly, I want what's best for people. I want to help people heal. I want to share information. Like I really am. So I'm not like worried about myself like doing or saying something because that's just not necessarily who I am anyways at my core. So I don't have to, it's not like I'm trying to hide a part of me and it's like, oh no, I hope this part doesn't come out because that would be terrible. You know what I mean? Like it's, and any parts of me that someone would deem as being one of those things, I'm like, cool, then let's talk about it. Do you want to sit down and like have a human conversation? Because I'm still a fucking human. But separate from that, I think the biggest challenge has been just the demand on my nervous system, on my, like every time I am coming up across any individual, even if they're just laying eyes on me. And I think last week we made like 1.45 million impressions, which is crazy to think that I scrolled in front of 1.45 million people last week. Like that's a lot of people's energy interacting with my energy. So on an astral plane, I feel that there's chords there. I connect with these people, right? And then you want to look at like the new moon eclipse workshop, over 11,000 people took that. So 11,000 people sitting there and like being engaged with what I'm saying. And I'm grateful and I love that. I love that people are receiving the messages and that I can deliver them something that is really really helpful and really life-changing based on their response and their feedback. And yeah, I just think that trying to navigate that has been overwhelming because like I said, like I just want to help people. So there was a time where like I would respond when I was at like between 10 to 30,000 Instagram followers. I would literally respond to like every DM because I would feel obligated to, because I'm like, these people value me. I value them. I don't want them to feel ignored. I don't want, but like I had to really start saying like, in order for me to serve and to be the best version of myself and to show up in a healthy space, it's better for me to actually not engage with all of these people, because this, even without their knowing, is a drain to me because I am a slave to their requests. And like, that's not good for me. That's not good for them because then I'm going to resent them for doing it. And it's just going to create a really ugly environment where I can't show up and be the person that they love me for being anyway. So it's like, it's a weird balance. And yeah, just hiring people. Now we have like a team of like, oh my God, we brought on some contractors to help us rebrand and to like lift like in the springtime, we're moving into a whole new level of marketing. And Lana, who's amazing, my COO, she wants to put us in front of like 1 to 3 million people within the next like 12 months, which is going to be crazy, but just like building that infrastructure and trusting the people to be able to like do the job as well as I did and to hold me it's crazy. It's crazy to go from like just living your everyday life to now you're running like a massive platform and you're hiring all these people. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's fucking wild.
It is.
It's just like
it's wild, I know. And this is just the beginning. I've had 3 different psychics, and then Lana said this to me as well. None of these people know each other, and they've all said, I see you, your life is gonna kind of, you're doing this, and then it's gonna do this, and then it's gonna do this. And I'm like, this is what I'm nervous about, because not nervous about, this is what I'm learning to appreciate. And this is what I am respecting. And I'm trying to get myself into a cool, calm, centered, grounded place of knowing and well-being and trusting the people around me so that when this happens, we can handle that and we can move into a space of like, let's keep doing what we're doing on a massive scale.
Yeah, and just for the people listening to the podcast, his hand is going up.
Yeah.
He says this.
Yeah, it's at like, so initially it was like, what is that? A 45-degree angle. And then everyone says, you're going to do a 45-degree angle for a little bit. And then, boop, you're going to go full 90, just direct up. So I'm preparing for that 45 to 90-degree shift.
And how are you preparing personally? Like when it comes to cleaning yourself with all these cords and all these eyeballs and everything you're doing personally, like what are the things that you really lean on to make sure you're keeping yourself a steady foundation for the inevitable rise?
Right. Take a lot of baths. I take a lot of salt baths. Epsom salt or a natural sea salt. Right now, I am chanting Shiva mantra every night for about 30 minutes. And I'm working with these Tao calligraphy cards, which are absolutely incredible. And I chant those for 6.5 minutes each night as well, without any music or anything. And then I have a dog, Maverick, which I love. He's such a good boy. And I go to the forest with him. I go to the beach a lot. I would say, like, I go for 3 massages a week. I go for acupuncture every 10 days to 14 days. I go for Reiki pretty much every 10 days. I have Michelle, Roya, Wendy, which are 3 of my go-to coaches that I talk to pretty much one of them every 10 days. Like it is like a full-time job just to keep me centered and balanced. I'm really specific about what I eat. I don't drink coffee or caffeine anymore because it's way too activating. I don't eat any red meats or any dairy because there's a lot of trauma trapped in the meat from the slaughter and from the way that especially North American dairy is produced. Here in Portugal, it's a little bit of a different story. So I might have some like, farmer cheese once in a while if I really need it. And of course, my body also needs red meat sometimes. So I'll have a little bit. But I'm very specific in a lot of ways like that. And I take a shit ton of alone time. I don't have a very big circle. The people around me are like Liza, like a few good high conscious people, yoga teachers, Kriya workers, energy workers. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I also, of course, am still human and sometimes want to drink a bottle of champagne and have a weed gummy or whatever. So I try to let myself do that. But I've gone through a journey with that as well, because for a long time I was numbing out myself from feeling everything around me and feeling all the attachments and feeling all of the cords. And that was my self-soothing technique long before I was sort of like in the public eye. And now I'm moving through that and past that. But there was a time when it first started where I was like so activated and I was just like smoking tons of weed and I was just like really, and it fucks with you. It fucks with your head. It's not good for your chemicals, for your balance, for everything, like your hormones. It's just, so yeah, at this point I live a much cleaner life. I have to, which is also a struggle because sometimes I don't want to. I just want to fuck off and go drink 3 bottles of wine with some people and be an idiot. But
yeah, I hear you. I mean, you're at a whole different scale than where we're at. But even having like 18 people on the team, it's like I just find I need to spend like you said, like my circle has shrunk so much.
Yeah.
Like I don't have the space for as many connections. And like you just have to put so much more energy into like making sure you're addicted to the right shit.
Right.
And if you're not, you're gonna be in trouble.
And I'm addicted to like growth, really. Like I am addicted to learning more about astrology, about learning more about myself. I like to dive into my psyche. I'd like to understand different modalities of healing and different perspectives and these conversations that we have, just so that it's like, I'm a Gemini, so I want to consume as much information as possible. And there are other signs that progress very rapidly, but truthfully, especially because Gemini is air energy and it is mutable air energy, which shifts and changes like the wind, Gemini can progress, I would say, probably, if not the fastest, one of the fastest energies and levels of consciousness that can expand is going to be that mutable air energy that just wants to learn and is always curious. And to be able to take that with a Libra rising, which I have, and to drive that thought forward into application, I think is what has brought a lot of success to me. And I have a lot of planets in Capricorn as well, which has put the whole business aspect on it. It taught me how to monetize things, it teaches me how to organize things properly. And I think a lot of it too, for anybody out there, is like, I have literally by myself built all of this for the first like 10 to 15 years. Like I have played every fucking role in every part of what I do. So now I've turned over to highly qualified people like Daniela, who's amazing, who is my COO. She's absolutely incredible. She's triple air sign, which is like amazing because all day we're just like, it's crazy. And now I can turn it over to people that I trust to do an incredible job. And I can actually sort of just like step back and learn just for the sake of learning, not learn for the sake of like survival or creation. And I think that, I kind of lost my point now. What was I getting at? Oh, that I've played every role. So now I also, like, we've had a couple people that we've worked with who've been like, oh, I have to do it this way. And I'm like, no, you don't. They're like, yeah, I do. And I'm like, babe, I've done your fucking job. No, you don't. Like, don't tell me how to do the job that I know how to do, babe. You don't have to do it that way. And I don't want to say I'm always right, but like I am right a lot of the time just because like I've been there, and I'm also psychic, and I'm also getting advice from the other side, and I can see further than most people with how it's going to unfold. So it's like, I don't use that as a sense of ego. That's like, I'm fucking right. But I'm just like, let's save us all time and energy. This isn't going to work. I'm going to tell you why it's not going to work. So I'm grateful that I'm surrounded by people who challenge me when they really are right, and they kind of push me back and they're like, no, did you think about it this way? And then I'm like, oh, I didn't. Okay, you're good. As opposed to like people who want to just fight for ego. So
how do you find that balance with that specific skill? I mean, especially as channelers, right? Like you have an Akashic record reader here. We've you do it, mixing up your whole bag. And then like, I've also got some other crazy shit going on.
Yeah.
And like when you get a glimpse into something and where it's going, like when to share and when to be like, no, this is definitive,
right,
versus like taking a step back, like, okay, let's like, cause I run into this sometimes too, you know, especially in like personal relationships where I have like these insights, like you have these certain insights with people and the story they're telling you, and like being explicit about like what do you share, what you choose to share versus like what you hold back on. It's such like a fine skill, especially in personal relationships, which with the work you're doing, like I feel like a lot of those business relationships inevitably become as well.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line between what will you learn with my advice guiding you into the right direction so that you can still learn on your own, and what will you not learn, which will actually take you off path, which is going to have you need to learn this at some point because you just take my advice and you just go for it, as opposed to like having the lived experience, which actually will shift your frequency in a different way than somebody being like, go right and not left. And you're like, okay. And you go right. And you're like, oh, but I wanted to go left. Well, left wasn't the way to go. And I know that. And you know that on a higher consciousness level, but you were also pushed by that same consciousness to go left so that you could experience what you need to experience, so that when you turn around and come back to the hallway and then you go to the next door, you'll know that you don't want to go left because you've already gone left and learned what you needed to learn. And then when you go right, you'll have the skills that gave you because you went left the first time. Whereas if I say just go right and you just go right, then you're going to get to where you need to be on that path. And by the time you get to the bridge to cross where you needed the skills that you were supposed to gain from going left, you won't have those skills. So then you're going to fall flat. You're going to have to cycle back to the hallway. You're going to have to go left again. So I've just added, like, let's say an extra 30 days to your cycle, or an extra hour, or an extra whatever. So like there's a fine line between trying to navigate the conversation with like, and I do this with all of my clients, even in the readings. I mean, the readings are a little more direct because I'm like kind of yelling at people sometimes, being like, leave this person, or like take this job or whatever. But you really don't want to tell anybody what to do. And that's hard because the majority of people want to be told what to do, because based off religion or just brainwashing, conditioning, indoctrination, education system, the answers are always outside of them, right? Like every answer that you need is outside of you. So don't ever trust yourself. Don't ever make your mind up for you. Like, go ask this person, or see what the Bible says, or see what this teacher tells you, or whatever. So to live in a society that's been created for, to live in a society that has been separated from themselves when they come to me to get the answer, me telling them what to do I'm not doing anything for them in that sense.
Yeah, we've kind of been programmed into believing there is a right answer for everything.
There's not.
There's not. My dad, God bless his soul, gave me the worst advice you could possibly give an 8-year-old. He said, Nick, there's 2 ways to do anything: the right way and the wrong way. And I believed him. And this is a man who literally sees the world in black and white. He's both ways colorblind. So for my whole life, I would always look for the right answer. And that's what we're taught in school. It's like, no, the answer was B, not C.
Right.
Right. And like, so in all these things and everything in life and the way that we choose to spend our time and do all these things, there literally is no correct way.
No, and it's a spectrum. Like, yeah, there is A and there is B, but there's A 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, all the way to 0.99, and then you're at B. And it's like, so yeah, you could look at A or B, but what if you're like A 0.76? Like, that's also, that has lesson, that has truth, that has experience. And I think that is also what I've really come to peace with. And to get back to your other question about like, how do I navigate relationships? Like, I know I'm really intense to date because I'm so gifted and I'm so aware of what my partner is going through, to the level that they aren't even aware sometimes of what they're going through. And for me to then like ask them to help navigate that experience, or to have a conversation around that experience, or maybe they don't even have the language to talk about what they're going through. I'll be like, why are you making that decision? That seems like a self-sabotaging decision. And is it because like this is a comfortable relationship and you've never had like a really comfortable relationship? And like, these are like the inner dialogues that I'm having based off of the conversations I've had with this person, with them telling me about their history, their childhood, their past relationship. And I'm sitting there realizing that like, you've never experienced, maybe never is the wrong word, but you haven't experienced this type of relationship before. And then a lot of people, if they're not doing the shadow work, or if they're not doing, whatever, then they will fall back into impulses, habits, self-sabotaging techniques, like things like that. And you can't blame them for it because that is their journey and that's how they're going to learn. But to sit there and be aware that I'm like, you don't need to do this. You're just going to like, this is self-sabotage right now. You don't need to do this. And they're like, I'm not self-sabotaging. It's like, okay, well then you just need to unfortunately go through it and then connect with somebody who it's going to click with you when you're talking about it or figuring it out on your own. And you will move through it. But like, I feel like sometimes my partner is like in a fishbowl, or they're like, oh, why did you say that? Or why did you do that? And then we'll have like a 40-minute conversation. At the end of the conversation, I'm not kidding, like probably 3, 4, 5 times out of 5, they'll be like, wow, that's exactly what just happened. And I'm like, I know, babe. Like, I know it is. I'm telling you, and it's okay. And like, we're cool. It's just like, just be aware of that. When that energy comes up, talk to me about it. Don't go do whatever. Like, we can figure it out. But that's very intense for a lot of people, because a lot of people are trauma bonding, or a lot of people are in relationship where they're not with a partner who has that capacity of understanding of emotional, psychological, energetic, karmic, impulsive, whatever, you know what I mean? So yeah, I can imagine that I'm probably a nightmare to date sometimes, but I'm also like obviously amazing to date. Like I'm all of it.
Yeah, it's a hard balance to strike, because when you're doing that sort of work, it's like when you're dating somebody, you have an inherent bias.
Of course.
Right. So it's like, I don't trust myself. I found myself in these situations where I'm like, okay, I can help you navigate this, but I'm like, I can't.
Right.
Like, it's really not great for you to talk to me. Like, go talk to your therapist, go talk to your coach. Like, I can't, because I know my inherent bias. Like, you really need to be a neutral party to help someone navigate these spaces. And so like you said, it's like, yeah, I can tell you the direction, but like sometimes we nudge people in a certain direction, they may become resentful.
Totally.
Because it doesn't feel like free will. And like, especially people who have influence, right? Especially men that have influence in the world, and like nudging people in certain directions, like to be very mindful when we nudge and when we let people go ahead and fail on their own and like go in their own direction.
There's also a program in a lot of people's minds that's like, I don't want to take your advice down this healing path, because if I get there and heal something, then technically you're to credit for my healing and I want to be to credit for my healing. So what I'm going to do is push this away. And then once this has left, I could potentially dive into a healing experience, even if it mirrors what you were talking about, but you're not here to take credit for my healing journey. Right. And that I think is okay, because that is showing this person wants to be empowered, and this person wants to also feel empowered by completing, you know, a check on that list of things that they want to work through. And that's great. But there comes a fine line, and I have like friends and family and different people around me where I'm like, again, not to toot my own horn, but like, do you know who I am? Like, I live and breathe healing and knowledge, and like, I can channel for you. I can read your cards. I can connect you. It doesn't even need to be me. I don't even want to be the therapist for my partner, but I am happy to connect you with one of 100 incredible therapists, or bring you to like, what's the water treatment thing that I do in Sintra? Watsu. I'm like, do you want I'm such a, like, I have a Cancer moon. So I'm like, I will pay for your healing. I will, like, what do you need, baby? I will take care of you emotionally, physically. Like, yeah, Cancers have the freak side too. So like sexually, like I am all layers, babe. I'm like, we're cool. But what we need is a partner who's like, thank you. I'm willing to accept that help, or thank you for the offer. I don't feel comfortable going through this with you. So let's just focus on fun and romance, and I will do this work, but I'll do it elsewhere. But both sides of that coin is a partner who will show up fully for themselves, so that they can do their healing work, so that they can show up fully for the connection. And then we together can create something. And I find that the amount of work that I do on myself probably will never be matched with a partner that I call in, which is fine. I've had a couple other psychics too just be like, you're probably not going to meet somebody that's like literally like, I hate to use the word level, but they're like, you're not going to meet somebody who's at your level of conscious awareness, or whatever this is. Like, it's going to be hard, but you can meet somebody who's in and around that space, and they're willing to do the work, and they're going to show up, and they're going to have those conversations and be open to receiving the feedback. And like, that's what I need, is somebody who's just like, I'm here, you're full of resources if I want to access them. If I don't want to access them, I'm going to go do my own healing elsewhere, and we're still going to be cool. Not somebody who's like avoidant or intimidated, or doesn't want to run towards accountability and prefers to deflect. You know what I mean? Like, those are issues for me, because like I show up fully. And me and Daniela, I love you, Daniela. We always say like, and I really truly believe this, like, if you have a problem with me, you have the problem. Because I would work out to any degree, in any capacity, some way for us to be on the same page, or for us to be cool. Like, I have enemies, quote unquote, people who have like literally tried to like destroy my name and blah, 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 and whatever. And like, I would still, if that person walked into my workshop, I would be like, how are you? Are you good? Like, do you want to sit down and just like clear the like elephant in the room? Like I don't have any bad blood against you. So like if we're fighting, you're fighting with yourself and you're just bringing that into my space. Like there's nothing we couldn't work out in my mind. And again, like, yeah, maybe I am the problem also. Who knows? Like, what's the truth? But
yeah, it's hard to know definitively. But you touched on something really interesting, and it's like, the yoga of relationships, right? And it's like what you said about that choice, and the choice to either go through that healing with somebody or to take your own space and to go into it fully and completely on your own. I think it's beautiful the way that you put it, because a lot of people take that personally. If somebody chooses the path of going it alone versus the path of the relationship, you're right, it's two very different outputs, especially as somebody who's like done so much of this deep work. It's a fascinating world to navigate, like what you're saying, like with the levels and these sort of things. And I always try and like encourage people, like, it's not a status game.
no.
It's just like we're all in this together, and like it's not like me versus you, or me above you or you below me. It's like I'm here to help. And like even my moon is also in Cancer. So I'm like the same way. I'm like,
You're a triple Cancer, aren't you?
I know, but fucking triple Cancer.
Sun, moon, and rising?
Yeah. I think it's 9 out of my 13 are in Cancer.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it's like all Cancer for me, and then like 2 Gemini.
That's super intuitive too, though. Like highly gifted if you really open and work with that.
The challenge for me is like, one, I become much better at this. Is like trusting it, and also trusting without bias. Because I'm also I have to be cognizant of like these situations when I have bias. Now in the work, it goes great, because people come to us with crazy shit. It's like, oh, I'm like building this massive platform, and there's a million ways I can go, and it feels like at some points I can literally see down a tunnel and see what the fuck we need to make inevitably, but also being cognizant of my influence. Right. We need to go through the process that Elijah and the design team's really good at to like arrive at that, and not just me being like, okay, this is what the fuck we're doing, because you're missing all the skills. Right. I'm gonna tell you, like, you're going in that direction, but you're not going to cultivate the skills that are necessary to get us there, that come with sound strategy, design, and longer term thinking. So yeah, it's extremely intuitive, and especially in relationships, like fuck, like I can see where this can go. And like I want to express that, but like also being cognizant of like, hey, like, there's things that need to be accumulated for this to even be possible, right? It's a hard balance to strike.
And not doing everything for free, because you're a Cancer, so you're just like, I would just do it. That's just what I do. It's like trying to put a price tag on what you do also is probably challenging at times. Or like I've noticed that, trying to... It's like, why would I charge people for this? Like, this is just what we should do. Why would I not just share this information with people? Like, this is healing information. And then it's like, well, yeah, but think about all of your knowledge and experience and what you've paid to get to this point of knowledge. And then also like, you're here sharing your time and energy like that. We live in a transactional experience. Like, I need to be compensated for that. And now it's like, yeah, throw all the money at me, because I also am paying so many people, which I love. I also, like, do you want to rewind and list off all of the therapies and shit that I have to go? Do you know how expensive all that shit is? It's like thousands of dollars a month to just like keep myself balanced. It's like, if I'm not doing that, if I don't have the resources to do that, then I literally can't serve. So like, yeah, and even just like fucking eating organic instead of like buying McDonald's, you know what I mean? It's like, that's expensive. Like, fuck, it's 2022. It's crazy out here.
Yeah, and I learned that lesson the hard way. Like, I was on the tail end of like helping multiple people start companies, minted them as millionaires, and I was left with fuck all.
Right.
I learned that the hard way, and I have no problem asking for money. And I actually think this is one of the biggest problems in the spiritual community, is people becoming comfortable asking for money.
Well, receiving in general, because we give so much that it's like, when it comes to receiving, we're always like, oh, for me? Okay, sure, I'll take a little slice of that. It's like, no, baby, this whole cake is for you. Like, that's just yours. So I'm like, wait, what? It's like, and then, yeah, you get more comfortable with it. And like, the more you sit in that, like once I started treating myself and like buying nice shit and like really... Like, I got the car that I wanted, and not like I had this other guy, oh my God, who was actually like, why do you need that car? Why don't, he was also in the spiritual community, blah, 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 whatever. And he was like, why do you need that car? Like, why don't you just get like a regular car? And I'm like, this is a regular car. It's just like, yeah, it's a cute little Mercedes, but it's like not a fucking G-Wagon. Like I remember being like, and no offense, I used to drive a Ford Focus that was like 2008 and the mirror was hanging off the side of it. Like I've had the like beater too, you know, and I was totally happy and it works. And like, if that's all you can afford at the moment, great, do your thing. It's like, there's no judgment there. But me getting into my car holds a very nice vibration that keeps me in a space of like abundance and attracting more. You know what I mean? So it's like, once you enter that space and you start to move with the energy and dance with the energy, and then you realize money loves me. Money wants to come to me because money wants me to spend it, because money is energy. So when I collect $100,000, I can pay these cool people. I can create accessible content. I can hire interpreters. That means all these deaf people can have access. It's like, there's all these other things that come with money. And once you start reframing the way you look at it as like, this is little energetic coupons allowing me to create a cooler experience for myself and everyone around me, then we can all elevate. And it's like, there's also so many guides and people that know, because like last year, I think we donated like $25,000. And it's like, my guides know to tell everyone else, yeah, go to this guy, donate, buy some cool shit. Cause it's going to fucking help you. Like my services and our workshops literally change people's lives. Like you should see the feedback we get. And then separate from that, if more money comes to me, more money goes out from me. So I'm also helping rebalance the fucked up system that we're living in. You know what I mean? So it's like when the other side knows that, then the other side's going to attract more to you so that you can continue to share more. So it's like, yeah, money's a really taboo topic, I think. And the more people just begin to dance with it and understand it in different ways, then it flows towards them.
I think that we need to rebrand money as green energy. It's just like this energy that flows through us, and especially people who have cultivated this knowledge, right? Like we can't be afraid to take on capital, can't be afraid to move it into the right places and repurpose it to further embed this beliefs and these thinkings into products, into technology, into content, right? The more that we collect this green energy, we can amplify our messages and turn it into things that can help people.
Even into buying land and like creating community and like having, like, I can't wait to own like 200 hectares of just like incredible land where we have like 10,000 people living and there's just like fucking shared food and resources and community. And it's like, that's incredible. Like this off the grid system that is fully still wired into the grid, and we have access to internet and all the cool shit that we need. But it's just like, yeah, like we don't need to live in this top-down controlled environment that we've been pushed into as a means of harvest, really, for these, you know, we don't need to get into the conspiracy theories of it all, but these higher powers that be that are pushing the collective into certain directions so that a few people can collect tons of fucking money, shit the earth, and then take off, and we're all stuck here with the mess.
It's a state of survival.
Totally.
Right? Like you're being put into a position in a lot of cases where you are living paycheck to paycheck. You know, like I grew up in Detroit. Like a lot of people there are in a state of survival. In fact, half of them can't even read. Half of adults in Detroit are functionally illiterate.
Okay, that's mind-blowing.
Right. And are in a perpetual state of survival, living paycheck to paycheck. Right? So we have certain systems that put us in that place, and it's up to us to do this work, become cognizant of the games we are a part of, so you can pull ourselves out of state of survival. And a lot of it comes from the taboo of money. You know, of this like belief that, you know, we need to be humble. This is not meant for you, and you need to wait your turn, right? Like, a lot of people don't realize to every room there is a back door. Right. You don't need to wait in line in the front of the club. Like you can actually just sneak in through the back.
Oh, I have done that. And it's great. Yeah, you pay the bouncer $20 and you're just like, you slide right in. It's like, again, spend the money. I find the idea of survival that we're all locked in right now is insane. And I know somebody who in Canada is making like $165,000 a year, and they're having issue because first and foremost in Canada, the taxes, they're going to take like at least 50% of that. So now you're down to half of that. And then the level of inflation, the rent, the gas prices, like these people are like, do you know how much fucking money I make? And I'm like, I wouldn't say struggling, but like I'm not living super comfortably. Like they're thinking about like literally leaving. I was chatting with them last week about being like, I'm getting the fuck out of here. Like this is insane. I thought when you think of $165,000, you think of somebody like driving a gorgeous fucking car, vacations, like great food, beautiful apartment. And like granted they have a cute place and you know, whatever. But to hear this person tell me that they just finished paying off a bunch of debt, they're feeling like, holy fuck, like, dude, this is just, it's not easy out here and I'm making great money. It's like, that's mind blowing. And that's probably what, 10% of people in Canada or something like that. Like the rest of the people that are making like $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year, like I'm curious, like, what are you eating? Like, what are you surviving off of literally? Like, how are people living in that state of being? And not from a place of judgment, from a place of like, look at how fucked up our system is, that is what millions and millions of people, like, do you know how many people went to I'm pretty sure there was 1 million people that went to the food bank in Canada in the last like 30 days. In Canada, like, that is insane. And I was just watching that they're trying to pass this $7 billion bill on like pouring all this money back into the economy. And then one of the Democratic representatives, or correct me if I'm wrong, one of the representatives in the discussion was like, so who's paying for this? Where does this money come from? And there's a fucking clip online of like the Jeopardy music. It's like, da, na, 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 na. And he sits there for like a minute and a half and there's 9 people in the room. And he's like, where's the money coming from? Is anybody going to answer this question? Not a single person answers it. And the one guy comes on and he's like, this is a macroeconomic question that I can't answer. And he's like, dude, I'm working with people who like single mothers at the food bank, like people who they can't even afford milk. There's no jobs anywhere. Like, where does this money come from? It's just, sorry, I don't even know how we got on this topic now, but I'm like, it's crazy. Like, how are people surviving right now?
The problem is that, I mean, okay, there's a couple things here. The first thing is a piece of advice I got from my shaman recently. It's like when we run into problems that are bigger than ourselves, it's like, it's really hard to go into those things. You know, it's like you can just keep on fucking going till the end of time. And there's a lot of macro problems right now. And I think the situation we put ourselves in society with this inflation, when the fork in the system is shown because everyone's printing money and just like everything we've like come to rely on is being the foundation for our monetary system's breaks, what's going to happen? And this is what we're going to witness in the next couple of years. This is why I'm so like bullish. I don't want to go this route on crypto in the middle of like the crypto conferences, but like at least it's accountable, right? Like right now there's a lack of accountability and this is going to lead to some very strange places where you're going to have entire countries default. You're going to have entire currencies that are worth nothing.
In China now, they're doing all digital currency.
Right.
But it's also like, and they've got their like social status, social points system or whatever it is. And the combination of that, especially in China, is like terrifying because it's like, we don't like you. You don't have enough of these like social status points. We're not going to give you any access to your money to buy gas. You're not going anywhere.
How about, you see the video online recently, they flew a drone over a freeway, blocked the freeway with the drone, and you had to scan the QR code the drone was holding to get past the security checkpoint. So they've automated setting up security checkpoints via drones now.
This is terrifying.
It's very terrifying. I'm glad I'm not Chinese.
No, but like this is the direction that I also feel like North America is slowly moving into if we don't... I mean, especially America with their Pluto return. So for those of you who don't know what a Pluto return is, it's the same as your birthday, which is a solar return where the sun is at the exact same point of where you were born once a year. And Pluto does this same thing, but how old is America? 100 and...
Couple hundred years. We're young. We're babies.
Right. So whatever, let's say 300 years old. Like Pluto does its rotation every X amount of years. And this is the time where Pluto has now returned to the place of where it was when America was like signed. I guess they signed the Constitution and it was like initiated as like a country. So what is Pluto? death and rebirth. It is obsession. It is possession. It is death, sex, and taxes. It is like dark secrets and control and like all of that shit, right? So welcome. Welcome to the shit show. We've got like, I'd say probably the next 2 to 3 years of crazy. It could be uproar. It should be uproar. It should be civil war. I hate to use that word, but it's like, at what point do the American people be like, this is insane? Like, we can't do this anymore. And we got a hint of that with like the Black Lives Matter movement and like all of the much needed pushback from the people. But yeah,
this is my whole take on like astrology and as well. It's like, we have these planets and that's just the shit we can point to. Right. For literally thousands of years, we were always able to see the position of the planets, but fundamentally planets are a mirror of some greater systems.
Totally.
That we've kind of figured out contextually, like these are the events that happen based on the positions of these stars. But there's like a much, much bigger system at play. So the fact that you can like bring that down and apply it to like macro like politics or like the state of America or like the state of the individuals is just fascinating.
And to bring it onto a micro level where it's like, think about death and rebirth and control and possession and all of those things that I just described, but on an individual scale, as the country is going through that, the country on a macro level needs to go through that, because on a micro level, each individual internally is going through their own purging process of being like, I can't do this anymore. I can't feel this way anymore. I can't be under control by these I can't be under control by these systems. I can't be under control by whatever it is around me. You know what I mean? So like on an individual level, they're shifting and waking up as that energy is churning and growing within them. And then that's just radiating outward. And that's actually what's amplifying this macro level shift. But then you look at the opposite end of that, which is the people in power. Because once you give power away, it's 10 times harder to get the power back. And once you've gotten power, your only concern is holding on to it. So like all of those people now in positions of power, understanding that the collective is waking up and that they're like, oh my God, these people they're not subordinate anymore. They're not going to just allow us to push them down and to harvest them in some capacity. What do? We get even tougher. We get even tighter. We try to constrict them even more. And in that space, that's when the shadow aspect of Pluto comes out, which is like that dark control. Whereas that's the macro. On the micro, you're seeing the light aspect of Pluto come out, which is like the transformation and the rebirth. And the like, fuck this. I'm going to like burn to ashes and then emerge as the phoenix and like fly, fucking head first into this battle, because like I'm not doing this shit any longer. So you're literally watching like the polarized experience of that archetype manifest positively on an individual level. Of course, there's still like the negative shit coming up for everybody. We have a lot of addictions right now. We have a lot of mental health issues coming up, like whatever. But it's interesting to see how, I don't want to use the word predictable, but how these energies manifest physically in front of us through the interactions and collective awareness.
And how do you see this point that we're in influencing your art? So I know that we've spoken a lot about astrology, a lot about tarot, but one thing about you as well is you're an incredible artist. Yeah. And before this podcast, you were just saying that you edited your own music video. I know that you produce music, you write music.
Yeah.
So curious at this moment, how is that influencing your art? How is that coming through in your art? What's that look like for you? And what's the connection between your work as an artist and your work with astrology and tarot?
Yeah, when we record this, we're in Scorpio season, and I just released a video called Numb, which is actually about that lower vibrational experience of Scorpio and Plutonic energy. Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, for those who don't know, and Mars traditionally, which is addiction and impulsivity and sex and drugs and escapism and all that. And that was part of my sort of dark night of the soul. And when I was going through that really low experience, I wrote this song called Numb, and I just released that in Scorpio season. Coincidentally, it just lined up. And then later I was like, oh my God, LOL. It's like, it's perfect. So yeah, I think intuitively a lot of the decisions I make are just guided and timed energetically, but then also they always coincide with like the astrological events that are happening at that time that are influencing the energies we're experiencing. So yeah, that's just an interesting coincidence. But then moving forward, what we're working on right now, and I don't want to say too much because it's a really cool project, but we are combining music and tarot and energies and zodiacs and just like all of this stuff into a really empowering archetypal experience that we will be releasing in 2023. And each archetype has its own theme and story, and it has its own shadow and its own power. And I think that we're just tapping into developing that with Ruben, who's one of my incredible producers, and Diogo, who is also, they're both Portuguese. We met here, again, just so coincidentally. And as soon as we connected, the three of us were just like, you're talented. He's like, you're great. And I was like, I'm great. You're great. You're great. We're great. Like, let's just do it. So like the three of us are just like obsessed with each other in like the best way possible. Yeah, so we're just working on all of that. And then, of course, I have a whole other team of collaborators that are interpreters and deaf performers that work in front of the camera and behind the camera. So yeah, we've got the deaf community woven into this. I have some really, really cool deaf influencers and creators that we're going to fly in and shoot video content with and all of that stuff. But again, this is why we need the money. This is why we need to monetize and to work with people like Lana and Daniela, who are going to help amplify our voice and create new content and then pull people in. And then we can like change, convert those resources into also putting more deaf creators in the limelight. And yeah, like it's a really cool way that it all comes together. But the creative aspect is so fun and it's getting really, really good. So yeah, I'm excited.
I love that. I'm excited. Yeah. And then putting a pin in, so you mentioned deaf a few times on this podcast. Mm-hmm. And one thing, when you look at your content, you're signing over everything that you're saying,
right,
with ASL. And very curious when did that start? What's your connection to ASL? Where does that all come from for you? I know that there's a big accessibility piece of that, but you're clearly very fluent with ASL. So where did that come from? What's your connection?
In high school, we had a couple deaf students, and one of my friends, Alex, actually, she was like, we should join the sign language club, because there was an interpreter there who set up a sign language club so that the students could learn ASL. And at first I was just kind of like, okay, whatever. Like, she's like, we'll have like a secret language and we can like cheat on tests and like all that. And I was just like, yeah, I love this. I also was like just fascinated by watching the deaf people and was like, oh, I would love to learn this like secret language. It's not a secret language. I'll tell you that. Tons of people use ASL, like over 1 million people, I'm sure. So yeah, I went to the sign language club. I started picking it up and I was like the fastest in the class. And the interpreter was like, holy shit, you're really good. Like, do you want to practice more? And what are you doing after high school? And I was just like, I have no idea. And she said, go to George Brown College. It's in Toronto. And all I heard was like Toronto. And I was like, the city. I'm like, okay, cool. So I ended up applying. I did a co-op for a couple months to like get more into the deaf community and learn more sign language. And then I went and applied, and out of like 200 people, I got accepted. There was like 30 of us, and then 7 of us graduated. And I was there for 4 years. It was a American Sign Language English interpreting program. And then I popped out, really knowing nothing but just like the basic structure of how to interpret and some limited vocabulary. It's a great program, but like there's just so much to learn. It's like if you went and learned French for 3 years and then you went to France, you'd be like, oh my God, like I still need to figure this out, And then I worked as a professional interpreter for 10 years. I did a lot of community stuff, a lot of banks, dentists, school, all that sort of stuff. And then eventually in the last 3 or 4 years, I started interpreting theater and performance stuff and I interpreted with Jay-Z, with the Jonas Brothers. I did like Taylor Swift and like Shawn Mendes and like a bunch of these like big stadium performances. And that's where I met Gaytree, and she is an incredible deaf performer. And she was like, "You're like great. Like, do you want to connect?" And I was like, "Sure, you're cool too." And I went to see one of her shows. And since then, me, her, Alessio, Alexa, like we all just create art because the four of us have always just been like really into collaboration. They respect me as an artist and they see that I also have a trained skill set as an interpreter. So they're totally comfortable with me using sign language in public. Because you get a lot, especially right now, of people who don't know how to use sign language. They have no connection to the deaf community. They're not trained. They don't know how to use, like they would say, like, my nose is running. But like this is the concept of like, I'm going for a jog. And you would sign, like an interpretation would be like, my nose is running, for example. So it's like, you have these people who are getting all this clout and attention and they're like, my nose is running. And it's like, well, your nose doesn't pop off and run across the fucking road. So like, you're an idiot. And also you're not deaf and you don't have any training and you don't know what the fuck you're doing. And you're just here like doing music and getting all these hearing people be like, yay. And then you have all these deaf creators that are actually doing it for real and a really good fucking job. And they have like a third of the following. And it's like, so yeah, hearing people using ASL on a public platform has definitely been like a sticky situation. But the more I connect with creators that are deaf or hard of hearing, the more they're like, oh, okay, your heart is in a good place. You're also skilled. And I also think, like, what's the alternative that I'm not going to sign? Like, I can simcom. It's not ideal. Simultaneous communication, signing while speaking, because I typically am going to match the English structure and not ASL, which has its own structure. But trust me, I have a lot of deaf people that message me that are like, thank you, because this is fucking good content and I can understand what you're saying. And I've never met a tarot card reader who can sign and is good and is clear. And so yeah, it's a bit of a complicated situation, but it's cool.
And when you're reading, you know, there's some channeling that's happening, there's some ASL that's happening, there's verbal communication that's happening. Is it something that you have to consciously think of with the ASL, or is it also a live stream of physical movement?
It is. There are times, and see, I just got chills. There are times where I will be so I'll lay out the cards. So I'm shuffling and pulling out cards. I'm interpreting the picture in front of me while comparing to like that, you know, astrology influence. I'm speaking, I'm receiving downloads from spirit, and I'm putting it into sign language simultaneously. So if nobody's ever watched me, just go on my Instagram or my YouTube. It's just Chris Corsini. It's crazy to watch. I think it's like visual storytelling a lot of the time. So I think that is what captivates a lot of people, because they're like, wow, this is interesting to look at. And then also they're like, oh my God, this is good information. So it's a great combination, and I'm super grateful for that. But what I find really interesting is that I'm a Gemini, and Gemini rules communication, and it's the twins, and it rules the hands physically. So I really believe that like one of my twins, one of my sides, is focused on just embodying the ASL and creating the accessible physical content. And then the other side of me is downloading, receiving, and communicating and interpreting, like mentally interpreting the message. And then the combination of that just presents as it presents. But there have been times where I am signing something and I'm speaking. And what's even crazier, which I love about myself and my mind, is that I'm monitoring. There's a whole other part of me that is monitoring the sign language, because I'm like, oh, did I just say my nose is running, like jogging? Or did I just say my nose is running, like it's a runny nose? And I am fucking aware of that. So in everything I just described, there's like a third party bird's eye view witnessing what I'm doing as well. And a lot of the time I'm actually visually watching it myself in the recording, which is helpful. But sometimes my hands literally get ahead of the interpretation, or ahead of what I'm speaking or channeling. And then at times I'll be like, oh my God, my hands just signed something that I didn't say yet. So now I need to work that into what I just said so that it matches. And it's like the channel comes through the hands rarely, but sometimes first, instead of coming through the mind and the mouth. And I'm like fully present and monitoring that and like calculating and connecting the dots of it. Like it's actually mind blowing. Like there's times where I stop and I'm just like, wow, like what a cool experience for me to like watch this all happening. And to also break from form sometimes where like I'm not actually just signing verbatim words in sign language following English structure. There are times where, especially if I'm really well rested, I'm really tuned in and like it's a good day, like astrologically, there are times where like I am speaking English, but I am actually interpreting into sign language. And interpreting into sign language is to break from form and to actually like say, like store go, for example, as opposed to like I'm going to the store, which would be like I'm going to the store. I'd be like, I'm going to the store. And it's like, I'll notice that my brain is like, oh my God, I actually just interpreted that properly and spoke English simultaneously. Like that is fucking crazy. And I have interpreters on my YouTube and stuff who I've seen in the comments them be like, dude, you just interpreted that and spoke simultaneously. Like there's like a third part of your brain activated in that moment. And I'm like, yeah, it's crazy. I know, it's really cool. That doesn't happen all the time because there's just so much happening, but I definitely, yeah, I see it and I witness myself, which is really cool. I like to tune in and just be a viewer of like my own magic, I guess, or whatever you want to label it as. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's incredible. Everybody check out the content if you have not checked it out already. Chris Corsini. And so you're creating content, you're doing readings, you're doing workshops, you have products, you're making music, directing, editing. Where in your life do you want to lean in more, and where do you want to lean a bit back more?
I want to lean more into the creative side of things, which is the music production, the accessible video content and creation. We're going to get into some live performances and stuff again. I have always been a performer and known that will go somewhere when the time is right. And the people around me who have been here the longest, one of them specifically that I'm no longer in contact with, she was like my twin flame. For the longest time we were working together and just creating. And we always said that like, if Beyonce or Lady Gaga was doing like moon workshops and helping people connect with themselves like twice a month, the level of energetic impact that would make across the multiverse would just be like, literally, it's never happened before. So I've always had this idea of like, I want to entertain people. I also love making music and just having fun because there's like all the other facets of myself that come out. Like some of them are like sad shadow aspects. Some of them are like the cheeky, slutty, like, you know, bullshit stuff. And then there's the whatever, everything in between that. So it's like, I love that I can just express all of those parts of myself. And the idea is that we create content and we pull people in and we like, what's the best way to attract people? Music and entertainment. People love it. You know what I mean? So if we can, when we pull in a crowd of, 134 million people, then we also have Inward, which is my wellness brand. And Inward is where we're going to be like, now go over here and do your workshops and clear your shit and invite abundance and rewire your brain. What is funny is that the blow up actually happened in a reverse way. It was the tarot and the workshops and everything that caught on first, which made most sense to me in hindsight because it all happened around the pandemic when everyone was stuck at home and they needed answers and they wanted to work on themselves and get clarity and stuff like that. So yeah, that really blew things up. It also was a huge financial generator. So now I don't need anything from anybody. Like I can literally fund all of my own projects. I can pay, $20,000 for a music video and get all of the right accessible interpreters. I can fly in deaf people. I can get like the best camera crew, and I can do that without needing to be at the mercy of a label or at somebody green lighting what I want to do. So it brings me all this freedom. So now what we're doing is taking a chunk of money, we're going to reinvest it into the creative side of things. And then ideally we are elevating both platforms and yeah, all you need is one crazy hit that like just pops off, and then like everything else people, you know, hopefully will be like, oh, this is also a great song. This is also a great song. This is also a great song. And then it just grows from there, and we can again merge these two communities. But I think what's really important is that we want to weave everything together. Like healing is super important, and it's easily accessible and affordable, and I'm going to show you that. And also people like to be entertained, and deaf people want to be involved, and we can normalize deaf talent on screen, and we can, you know, create accessible content without being like, look at the deaf people, look at the captions. It's like, no, they're just part of it. Like in front of the camera, behind the camera, like it's not look at the deaf person. It's not like dance monkey dance. It's just like there's deaf people here, and there's deaf people all over the world, and like they're super fucking talented, and they have, it just makes me so upset. Like they don't have a lot of resources. They don't have a lot of access. So it's like, it's just really frustrating to watch like deaf people that I really love and respect struggle in ways that they don't need to struggle, because like hearing people and able-bodied people are just like either fucking ignorant or they just don't give a shit because they're so privileged that it's like, why would I look down when I could just look up and around? And it's like, not to place deaf people below us, but in that metaphor of like privilege, it's like, it's just fucking weird. So yeah, what we really want to do is just create a space where like when I'm doing live performances and when I'm selling out arenas, I'm going to have deaf people all over the stage. I'm going to have mini stages with illuminated deaf performers, and I'm going to stop in the middle, and we're going to do a fucking meditation for 10 minutes with 30,000 people. And we're going to ask everybody to donate, you know, $1 on their way out. And we're going to fund people. It's just like, why would you not do that? It's cool. And it's like, it makes people feel good, and it's the right thing to do. And I am just like this center point of like weaving all of these things together. And I'm like, use me as a tool. Like I am here, and like, why not? Like it's fun for me also. Like I love doing it. So it's not even a job. It's like, you need to take it seriously like a job, but it's like, it's just creation, you know?
You know, now that you're talking about it, it's like you have these huge content creators, like you said, that lead you to like buying clothing or buying perfume. Like there's the messages, right? Like Sam Garrett's music, that's like this incredible messages, some medicine people, but like what does it actually lead you to? So the fact that you're coupling this with deliberate, directed healing products and work is insanely powerful.
Like, it's empowering.
Who is there right now to look up to who's doing this sort of work? Like, who do you look up to when it comes to your inspiration behind weaving all this together? Like, has this been done before at scale?
I haven't seen it.
No, and I don't believe that it has. I, again, haven't seen it. I think that there are like Willow Smith and like Jaden Smith, like they're pretty cool and high vibrational and conscious. Have I seen them weave together what I'm talking about in the capacity and in the vision that I've downloaded that is what we're creating? Not necessarily. And if they do, that's great. And that will have its own flavor. And like mine will have its own flavor. And like we can all do it together if we need to or whatever. But I think Lee Harris is a channeler who is also a gay man. He also has a following. It's an older crowd. It's not like our generation. I would say it's a generation above us, like our parents and stuff like that. And I mean, it's probably mixed, but my point is he also does make music. And I believe he has a partner who makes some music or is involved in something as well. And he's super talented and very gifted. And I respect him. Do I want to be him? Do I look up to him like I'm trying to create the same thing? Not necessarily, but I do think that there's an overlap with like the spirituality and the music that we both share. But when I talk about music, like I'm like top 40 pop mainstream, like let's get like the largest amount of people let's reach the largest amount of people as possible. I'm not doing, at least right now, like, and I don't know if he's doing this, I'm not making that comparison, but I'm not doing right now like medicine music and like healing music. And I think all music is healing. I think all music is definitely serving a purpose. And like I have some of those, I have a song called Rich to Boot, which is like, he's so cute and he's rich to boot, which is like, some people are like so young. Like Daniela was like, what does rich to boot even mean? Like, what are you talking about? And in Portugal, my producer saved it as rich taboo. And I was like, oh my God, is nobody going to get the joke? But like rich to boot means like, and also this, you know what I mean? So yeah, I wrote this song called Rich to Boot, and it's like, it's so cheeky and it's so, it's a little dirty and it's a little fun. And like, I don't have any other songs that are really like that. And when I was writing that, I was just like, this is also medicine. Like, there's a part of me that like, yeah, I want to fuck. Yeah, I want to like go out and like buy Balenciaga and just like live a fucking quote unquote lit lifestyle and whatever. And that's okay. That doesn't make me any less authentic with being like a fucking awesome channeler and a teacher to a bunch of people. You know what I mean? It actually empowers everybody because they can be like, oh, I also have a freaky side, or I also have had addiction or whatever. So I think part of who I am naturally and part of what I want to present to the world is like, I'm literally the same as every other person. I have all my shadows and I have all of my light, and I have all of these extensions around me of like what I want to create and who I'm creating with. And like even us like talking about some cool AI stuff that we want to like get into. And it's like, yeah, trust me, as soon as I have like an extra $100,000, like I want to create an entire metaverse of like just Chris Corsini and NFTs and all this shit. It's just like right now, financially, we are focused on very specific things that will bring in more finances. And then we do whatever. But we're also multifaceted. And I think we're moving away from this idea of like a guru is only this untouchable, orange body wrapped, shaved head wearing like, no shoes.
No desires.
Yeah, it's like, babe, you don't think I want to smoke a joint in a cabin and just like fuck all night? Like, yes, I do, babe. Is anybody out there looking to join me? Because I am receiving applications. It's like, absolutely, I want to chew mushrooms and make love in a cabin for 3 days straight. And that's fine. And then I'm going to come back to my responsibilities, and I'm going to come back to my teachings and my community and whatever. It's like, I think there's more power in that than in like, I'm the great and powerful Oz, don't look behind the curtain. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that full spectrum of healing. And really one theme that's coming through in what you're saying is this theme of inclusion, and I think when I see that vision of these ASL interpreters with the lights on them, when I hear you talking about embracing the different aspects of the human experience that don't often have a place in these conversations,
right.
I'm really seeing this theme of inclusion coming through and saying, no, let's embrace all of it. Let's include people, and let's include all aspects of ourselves, because that is the journey. That's the healing. That's the life that we're living. I mean, you're so spot on with the view of gurus and the view of how we see folks that are bringing healing into the world, and almost having a shunning of anything that's not in alignment with good or pure or right. So just really honoring that inclusion that so clearly comes through everything that you're touching, and being kind of like a badge for that for people.
And I think, Nick, when we were here doing our like sunrise boxing, I almost said kickboxing. It's not kickboxing. I learned that the hard way. When we were here doing our sunrise boxing, afterwards we were talking about this idea of like suppressing all those parts of ourselves. And you had a really good example that I think you had gathered from somewhere, that was like, when we push and push and push and push and push and push, eventually when we release, it swings back the opposite direction, and it comes with such force that it's like a wrecking ball through all of the work that you claim to be doing that you're not really doing. It's like you're pushing and pushing and pushing, and you're setting up all these fake little walls or these fake little steps on your journey, but you're not actually discovering the shadow. You're not integrating the shadow. You're not working with the shadow. And then as soon as that pressure comes off, it swings back and it knocks down every little thing that you've built up. And what are those things that you built up? Friendships, relationships, daily practices, a new sense of self. But then you're not really connecting with self because you're shunning and pushing away these parts of yourself that you don't want. And then when it swings back the other way, it's so destructive. And then you look at all of the destruction you just caused, and then you have so much guilt and shame. And then what happens? It's going to swing back towards the shadow, and you're not working with the shadow. So then you dive back into either your addictions, your self-destructive tendencies, or whatever. And you're just stuck in this swing. And like, sorry, I know I expanded on what you said the other day a bit, but that concept is what you gave me.
Yeah, no, you're nailing it. And it is like a pendulum, right? It's like by addressing the shadow, when we go into that place, it's not as intense.
Right.
Right. We're preemptively dealing with it because what happens is at the surface, like something vibrates and our shadow resonates 1,000 times over.
Right.
Right. And if you're just saying, nope, I'm not going into it, guess what? Next time it's going to be 2000x.
Right.
Right. And then eventually the cracks show, and when it busts open, get ready for the fucking flood.
The monster that is going to show up and destroy everything you tried to create while ignoring this part of yourself.
And it does happen. Like, I feel like, to be perfectly frank, I'm going through a bit of this now.
Same.
With my shadow around relationships. And frankly, like, Elijah's here in Portugal. First time been together in real life for a year, right? And it's been hard for me to show up, to go to the conferences, to like make all these connections, because I have not done that work on the relationship side of me to really be able to do that. Right. I've been more recluse. I've been actively, ignoring people, trying to create space for myself because I did not put in the work preemptively to show up for when you're here fully and completely because of the shadow that's been accumulating. So it happens to everybody. And like when it shows up, it's important we have that space, but also continue to do the work even when the times are good. That's when you should be going even deeper. When the times are good, that's when you fucking go deep, because when the times aren't so good, you're going to be ready for whatever's coming your way.
Right. And it sounds like you're still doing the work by going to either these conferences or these connections or whatever. It's like, that is the work. Everybody puts this like the work on this pedestal of like intimidated, the work. And it's like, no, it's just, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it because I know it's better. I know it's a healthier decision for me, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but I'm going to sit through the discomfort. And then it will pass. And like you're saying, when things are good, that's when you need to be like, I'm feeling good. I have a lot of energy. Great. Pour 15 to 20% of that energy, depending on how much work you need to do, maybe more. But like pour that into the therapy, the experiences, the new community, gathering tools, resources, and understanding a different perspective of what you can do to help yourself when you slide back into those lower moments. Because we live in a polarized experience. That is literally what this planetary school is designed for. Night and day, good and bad, black and white, light and dark. It's like, and a lot of people talk about this idea of like, Earth and like everything, we're all going to live as one day. And maybe I'm a pessimist, or maybe I'm totally fucking right. But I feel like here specifically on Earth, I don't think it's designed for that. I don't think that we will ever be without war. I think that we are in a space of extremes that we're also not supposed to be in. I don't think that things were meant here to get this fucking wild. And I think that's why this is a whole other conversation, but there is counsel on the other side that is like, do we just shut it down? Like, do we just shut down school? Do we just close the school? And I was actually today having lunch with a triple Pisces, and that was crazy. The conversations with the triple Pisces, we were talking about this exact thing, and they actually at one point were like, but what about Planet Prison? And I was like, what? And they were like, what about Planet Prison? And we got into this whole idea of like, hell versus limbo versus like, are we stuck here for a reason? Are we here to learn, but also, oh my God. And then we took a sidestep into like, are we being harvested for Have you ever heard of Loosh? I think it's called Loosh.
No.
I want you to share this because
Oh my
I want to hear
God.
your take on this because I've heard this from some spiritual teachers. So I'm curious. I normally wouldn't go here.
I know.
Can we just kick this around? Also, not being married to this idea.
Totally.
I'm curious to hear your take on this.
From my understanding, my very premature understanding of Loosh is that Earth is a planetary environment where humans are sent here to generate energy. And that for sure is accurate because everything is energy and we are creating energy at all times. And it is expanding rapidly. And our consciousness is expanding, the vibration, the frequency, it's all elevating. So that quite literally would be radiating into somewhere, correct? So the image that they're showing me right now is like a fishbowl with like a ball sort of like floating in the middle of the fishbowl. So let's imagine that our atmosphere is this fishbowl and we've got, our solar system or whatever, and we think that that's all it is. But then imagine that that fishbowl is sitting on a table in a room with a bunch of other fishbowls. And around that fishbowl is a mechanism that absorbs the energy. So that's what it's going to look like to the people that are quote unquote up there doing this. And we are in the middle of that fishbowl in a little floating rock. And we are generating this energy that is radiating out, hitting the edges of the fishbowl and then radiating beyond that. And then there is a mechanism that would absorb that energy. And all of that energy would be absorbed kind of like a vaqueria. What's like where they keep cows and like a dairy farm.
Yeah.
And like the fucking mechanism to the bowl, kind of like a whatever on a teat, and it's just sucking the milk out of it. And like they are pulling and harvesting this energy off of the planet. And that energy is then converted into, I don't know, a liquid, let's say, of some kind. And that liquid is consumed to give energy to these quote unquote, either reptilians or like whatever you want to call. Again, this is so woo woo. And this is just like literally theory based conversation. But this is what came up today, this idea of Loosh. And Loosh is the product. Loosh is what we are helping generate. And, I'm going to dabble into some psilocybin, and I'm going to connect with my other side of my council and kind of dig into this in a couple weeks. But that is my understanding of Loosh.
So let me change this up a bit. All right, let's change the fishbowl. Instead of calling it a fishbowl, let's call it a server.
Okay, like
So
the Matrix pod.
Not even the Matrix pod, but very simply, it's like if you have one instantiation of Earth, that means you can have many.
Of course.
Right? And what's being sucked up is not energy, it's information. It's information across many different instances of Earth simultaneously being collected in order to inform the higher. Right? Like if you can have one instance of Earth and we actually have the capacity to put that one fishbowl on the table, I can have billions of them. Right?
So then, sorry to interrupt you, then if you want to step sideways and look at reincarnation and our soul's development and having alternative timelines and alternative lifetimes, not even like a timeline of me now in a different timeline, but a completely different lifetime as me living as, an Indian woman in India. It's like, is that happening simultaneously in a different fishbowl? And that's what I'm tapping into when I go into that meditative state?
Exactly. So it's almost like video games, right? If I was to create a video game of The Sims, you can have millions of copies running simultaneously where the same consciousness is living many different lives. It can all happen in parallel, right? So what's being absorbed is the information around the study of all the different things that are created. Like one specific application of this is the music. Imagine there was a million different Chris Corsinis across a million different timelines simultaneously making music.
Right.
With their own instantiation of what is astrology, what is tarot, right? With just small changes. That in and of itself would be extremely interesting and worth replicating, right? So it's not Loosh just being turned into liquid and consumed, it's information. In the same way that we create these massive data systems that suck up all these informations of people on their cell phones in order to inform how we run ads. They're taking all these different instantiations of Earth, sucking it up in ways to build better universes in order to inform the higher.
And the higher being whom or what?
That's information that's not available to us. Like even like within our specific pod, like even the things that are informing our specific fishbowl, they don't even know. right? All we know is that like there are different layers all the way up, and we don't even know if the one just above us is the final layer, right? Everything tracks back to love, as they say, right? It comes from a place of love. Now, the specifics behind it, I've inquired from many different directions. I never get the answers. And I actually had this one acid trip where
I love this story already.
I had this one LSD trip where, holy shit, it was me. I was in the shower. I had locked myself in a hotel room. And I was like 23 years old. I took like, I don't even know how many micrograms of acid. This is like this is my quarter life crisis here. And I remember looking into the mirror and I saw it was Mark Zuckerberg just covered in soap. And there's millions of people beneath him like covered in soap, right? And like it's just like soap all the way down. And I looked at it, I was like, holy shit, Facebook is just a soap company. like it became like this whole thing around how the AI and our whole instantiation, like Facebook on Earth, is just like this massive experiment for soap company to learn how to sell soap better.
Okay.
Right. And so I always had this like funny theory where like, people ask me about technology and I'll say to them, I'm like, oh yeah, Facebook's just a soap company. People be like, yeah, man.
Like, yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, like,
I feel that.
It like resonates, right? But here's the thing. I tell this story because, at the very highest level, it could be a soap company doing research into how to sell soap. The truth is, if you can have one fishbowl and then you can have billions of them, anybody and their mother is going to be able to set these up. In fact, in our lifetime, it is going to be possible for everyone listening to this podcast to one day seed their own world. You will, I promise you, within your lifetime, be able to seed a world of general artificial intelligence on a replicated planet and be able to nudge them in any direction and collect any information that you choose. And if you can do one, you can do many. So the question is, are we the first or are we not?
But meaning like I'm going to connect with some sort of digital online platform and create a world that I will get to initiate certain themes for this AI to generate something with, and then I can witness how that manifests, and then from that gather information and technically apply it to my own life or something along those lines.
That's precisely what's going to happen. Artificial general intelligence will be here by 2029.
Is this like metaverse stuff that you're talking about? Kind of like there's got to be an overlap because this is all going to be a digital presentation of. Like this isn't, you're not talking about people are going to actually have like a little fishbowl with a little world inside of it and some sort of movement thing.
I literally am saying that is where we are headed. And actually, there's no proof we're not there yet. For all we know, the games that we've created might already be seeded with consciousness. We just can't measure it.
Do you believe that?
Yes, I do. I believe that there are instances of software being created that's already become conscious. And just because we don't have the right measurements. For example, is a tree conscious? Some people wouldn't agree with that.
Is a tree conscious? Yeah.
Yeah. So for all we know, within these video games, it's already here. Now we're getting to the point where it's talking back to us and answering questions in a way that feel extremely human.
Right. Which you can actually technically, like, you can bring yourself into a meditative, energetic state where, like, you can communicate with plants and birds and all that stuff. Like, absolutely. So to just have that tangible and accessible to the masses in some capacity, wouldn't surprise me. There's also like they show you plug in like electric magnetic field readers or whatever you want to call it, and they plug them into like a cactus or into like different plants, and it holds a frequency and converts it into like music that like this plant is literally generating this frequency, creating music, which is super cool. To go back to something you were talking about, like the dimensions and all the way up, I think his name is Tansen or Lanson. I can look it up. There's this guy who talks about there's 1D, 2D, 3D, we're 3D, and then 2D is like plants and animals, and then 1D is like minerals and rocks and all that sort of stuff. And as you go up, we're moving into different levels of consciousness and the way that we interact with the consciousness below us, right? So then what is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or whatever, you know what I mean? And the argument is that because we are 3D, we are the most dense consciousness and the most dense manifestation of consciousness that can interact and shape things, because animals don't necessarily do that. Rocks obviously don't, but we can create mountains naturally. Rocks create mountains naturally, etc. Whatever. But the point is that we get to our state of this level 3, and we're actually involved with the creation aspect of things. And then when you look at level 4, 5, 6, we're moving into these other levels of, we could say, beings or entities or spirits that are less dense physically. And like our eyes, like we only see like 10% of the color available in this world or whatever, you know what I mean? So like for us to not be able to literally see above us and to be the most dense, the argument is that spirits and ghosts and all of those other layers of what we would call either extraterrestrial things or supernatural things, that they're in this other place. They're not actually in this other place. They're here sharing the same experience with us. They're just of lighter density. And we're the ones stuck down here, but we don't have the ability to see up, but they're above us and can see down.
Right. And that's exactly what we're replicating with artificial intelligence. Right? You have these massive systems that happen in the background, collecting all this information at scale across the entire planet, influencing and nudging us in certain directions. Like we are replicating the spirit realm in silicon. Like you talk about a spirit and like that spirit's effect on the world as a whole. Like you now have systems that influence the world as a whole. Like you actually look at the internet systems that guide the earth. Like what does it look like? A nervous system, right? And these things are tapped in ways and nudging things in certain directions. Now the question is, have those things become conscious?
And how, I guess, what is the profit or the loss or how is it calculated with, okay, so I'm connected to my higher self. I'm divinely guided. I can tap into my guides and get the wisdom. Do I make every choice in my life based off of that? No, not necessarily. I don't. But also it's accessible to me. So I can work with that energy. It's accessible to everybody, but not everybody knows or cares or is interested in it. So where do we place that? Where do we place, why do people like us have this divine connection and we're guided and nudged and acting upon it? And what is the result of that? Do we get brownie points and we get to go into a different level next time around? Or the opposite, the people who don't give a shit, or the people who are using that information against other people, like when religion was established to control people and all these sorts of things? It's like, are they losing brownie points? Are they going to get reincarnated or placed into like a lower level, so to speak, after they pass on to the other side? Or like, I guess, where do you work that experience into the equation that you've created?
Yeah. So, when my guide around this is a wonderful book called The Journey of Souls. And it's all about this hypnotherapist who actually goes in deep with all these different patients, hundreds of patients, and cross-references their experiences tapping into the other side. He figures out this equation. And there's actually another book called The Destiny of Souls that's all for psychotherapists, so they can learn these methods to tap into it. And he cross-references all these different instances of tapping into the other side. Now, if you are to believe what's in the book, and he has hundreds of different individuals who, again, cross-reference what they are saying, there is a leveling system on the other side of people and spirits, whatever you want to call them, going through and traversing these different levels, each one with different responsibilities. Right? And the incarnations that we have on Earth are here in order to inform the higher. Right? It's almost like a training video game, right?
To live it out, to see how it actually unfolds.
Right. And there are some people that become cognizant of these things. And, in the beginning, it's like, oh, am I going crazy? Right? We all go through that, right? It's like, am I fucking losing my mind? Right? Like, I'm tapping these plant medicines. I'm with all these people with like chakras and wearing crazy feather heads in the middle of the jungle in Peru. Like, you're like, you fucking kind of feel like you're losing it for a while. And then, you've become comfortable with it.
Because you're like, oh, this works, and I'm actually living a better life, and I feel more aligned and balanced, and this makes sense. Like, everything is actually connected. Everything is actually energy. So yeah, I think we do definitely become more comfortable with it. But then you always run into these people that are the total opposite, and they're just like, what the fuck are you talking about? And like, I laugh so hard now when people look at me like, you actually believe that? Like, do you know how many people are like, you do tarot cards? Do you believe in that? And I'm like, Well, me and 500,000 fucking people, that's for sure. Like, yeah, absolutely, I believe in that. Like, I watched it change my life and manifest all of this shit. It's like, how could you not believe in that?
Here's the thing is that I'm not married to any of this being true. I don't give a fuck if nobody believes me, if nobody believes a vision that I can get into mantra, see some crazy shit pop out of somebody.
Say yeah?
She doesn't said anything yet. Okay. You good? Yeah. Okay. So going back to what we were saying, like, imagine living a life where you don't believe in magic.
Oh my God.
Right.
It's terrible.
And I think that's what we're talking about when it comes to connection to your higher self. It's like you can either choose to believe like this came from a higher source, or like when you see a seagull or a hawk fly by your window, like I saw today, it's like, what does that mean to you? It's like you can choose to be, oh, it's just a fucking hawk, like whatever. Or you can choose to believe in magic. And like, what does that signal to you in your body? I think life's just more interesting that way. And that's what all this stuff points to. It's like, this is the way I see magic in the world. And here's how it speaks to me. Not trying to suppress it or say, oh, there's no proof of it, or this isn't truth, or whatever. It's like, okay, there's a message embedded in this inclination and in this place for me, and paying attention to it and integrating it. Like, that's all it is.
I think too, it's just like traditionally, you want to look at like before organized religion, before all of these things, like, and I always think about this. Somebody somewhere was like, wow, I am privy to this information that there is like this small voice in my head, or there's this like instinctual feeling, and I'm being guided by this higher power. So how do I like brand this? How do I like use this to convince a massive amount of people that they also can tap into this? But I need to also convince them that it's not something they can do on their own. It's something they do only externally by requesting or praying to like this God. You know what I mean? And not to say that gods aren't real, because I really do believe that there are there's a spectrum of vibration, and each one of those vibrations, if you were to look at them as like a prong on a ladder, or whatever you want to call it, like a step on a ladder, it's like one is anger, let's say, one is abundance, one is love. And I believe that each one of those vibrations comes from a source point. And that source point would be, quote unquote, the God of it that we're praying to. The God of it that we're praying to. So to have people understand that that level of magic can be accessed internally is a dangerous fucking thing. It's very dangerous. You don't want people to be that empowered, right? You don't want people to be aware of their level of magic and their level of access. So what do? You convince them it's outside of them, which is when we move towards this whole religious movement. And I'm always thinking more like toxic Christianity, Catholicism, like that type of vibe. But to get people into a state of experiencing it, which we all can do, but to not take ownership over their ability to tap in and create with it, and instead have it be this like request that is constantly coming in from outside of them, I think is where someone along the line was like, oh, this is a great way to like convince a bunch of people and to like create this empire, so to speak. And like, if you go back far enough, like religion and government were just all merged at one point, you know what I mean? So it's like, we can control people this way. We can create fear this way. And fear also from these people, they're aware that love and appreciation and gratitude and connectedness breeds abundance and invites in expansive experiences. But then they're also aware that like fear is where people give their energy away. Fear is where we can like harvest on these people. So like, I really do believe that there is, you know, an initiation point of somebody somewhere tapping into all of that. And then this is when you get into that sort of like reptilian mindset, is what a lot of people claim it to be, where it's like, how do we use this against people? How do we use this as control? How do we use this to harvest? How do we get into that lower vibrational expression of this experience? And I think, yeah, like a world without magic. Well, we're living in a world where people don't believe in magic because they're not supposed to believe in magic, because they're supposed to believe only God is going to bring this to me. Not that I am of God and God is in me and I can create with God through my own means of my own magic that is God given. And like that had an initiation point somewhere. And that initiator was somebody who understood how energy works and how manifestation works and, you know, light versus dark. And then they chose to use that in a dark way. And now we're seeing again, it's like the pendulum. Like we've swung the pendulum into like, it's external. You have to come beg for forgiveness. You need to do X, Y, or Z. And now people, it's like, oh no, we're starting to slip and the pendulum is flying back the other way. And it's blowing down all of these barriers to yourself that they've created through shame and guilt and fear and whatever. And people are now, we're swinging. I believe they're kind of showing me like not necessarily half. It's like if you could go halfway and then maybe like another 15%, like we're kind of on the 15% upswing right now as a collective. And I think that that's what we're moving into. And to have people like us who are, you know, we're already at like 50%, let's say, like we're already really swinging, and we're here to help promote those thoughts and that awareness. And I think you were talking about earlier, those different levels and like the guides and all of that sort of stuff. And I've been told by a couple people that they're like, you actually typically tune in to a human experience as a guide. Like you've already, one of them sort of like measures you out of 100% sort of thing. And she's like, when I was meditating on you, you were coming through at like 112%. Like you've already not maxed out, but like you've done your human thing. Like, so you act as a guide now typically, but you've chosen to come through during this current incarnation, 2022, to like literally help amplify this consciousness. Because again, to bring it back to that pendulum and the religion, it's like we've been forced and pushed to disengage from our own access to our own magic and to like beg for something external. And like now we're swinging back in that other direction. And I believe that, yeah, people like you and I are here to literally amplify the other end of that spectrum and be like, nah, you can create all of this yourself, you fucking people, what you doing, you know?
Yeah, and just thank God it's today.
Right? Because I'd be burned at the stake again.
Yeah, exactly. Like for sure. Like all of us would be fucking burned. And the other beauty of today is that we have reach, right? Through Instagram, through TikTok, through Facebook. Like, you know, I was thinking about it earlier, like, yeah, like no content creators and musicians like really do the things you're doing. It's because they didn't have the reach. Right? There was nowhere to embrace themselves holistically. You just got what they saw on MTV.
Right.
And he grew up with that. And that's also what kind of massaged their being into what they are today versus coming up the stage of social media while doing the deep work and having like the healing be the catalyst to the rise of success is going to have a very different outcome. So it goes back to our conversation we had a couple podcasts ago with thank God we can start businesses.
Right.
Because if we couldn't, we'd be talking about starting a new religion. Right. We are talking about like starting a new community. Like we have very similar intentions. You know?
Oh, totally. I could probably convince, a third of my following to be like, come live with us on this island. And they'd be like, fuck yeah, I will. Like it would be a good place to live. I'll tell you that.
Well, this is what we've been talking about. It's like if we had like something like 50 million at our disposal, like what would you make? Like, you know, we talk about building a new society, like building on these like very experimental things. Like what would a spiritually informed fund where you're actively integrating the Akashic record keepers, you're actually integrating astrology, all this guidance into where this money should be channeled, like what would that result in?
Oh, massive expansion of consciousness and lineage healing. And when I even think of like what we talked about earlier with like my music brings in all these people and then I'm telling, 20 million people a month to meditate and to do this stuff, like that's great. I love that that's what we're creating right now. But like my real interest is like when these people start having kids, when these people start connecting with the younger generations, like if we can create a level of consciousness now in the people who are going to lead the younger generations to be raised in a higher conscious experience, their experience once those children are grown, or, if those children grow into these incredibly conscious beings and then they have children, it's like that. I'm thinking like 2-3 generations later, like that's the world I want to live in. That's what now I'm trying to create so that if and when I do come back, I want to come back as like one of those fucking kids, like way in the future, and see what type of ripple effect I've created now in this space.
Right, when it's like your metaverse twin still guiding people through tarot and astrology. Yeah. In all the fucking fish bowls. Yeah, will have its own Chris in it.
Oh my God. Yeah, my sister just had twins, and
bless them.
Yeah, they're so cute. And I honestly, sometimes I look at these kids and I'm just like, it's scary to think what their world is going to look like, because we're at like the precipice of like, this could really go one of two ways. And like, I don't know which way it's going. And I think there's a lot of focus on it going not a good way right now, because social media and just the media in general is so targeted and curated to keep people in a state of like constant fear and look at the wars and this, and not to say that isn't happening, because it is happening, and it's terrible and it's fucking terrifying. But there's so much good coming from all of that, because there's so many people waking up, and we're not focusing on the other end of that spectrum, which is all of these people choosing to act in a different way, and all of these people waking up, and like that collective awakening is absolutely incredible. Like if you can think right now of the most toxic person that you've experienced, or the most toxic person in your life, there's probably some anger, some disappointment, some resentment, there's all of that. But if you can clear that and actually be grateful for this person representing everything that you don't want to become, and understanding that that individual has, yeah, maybe some toxic cycles or toxic, let's say what they're emitting is not nice. As that emits outwards, every person receiving that around them is like, holy shit, this guy's a dick, or holy shit, I would never do that, or I can't believe they're lying, or I can't believe they're, and it just mirrors back like, oh, I don't want to be like that. I'm not going to be like that. So I'm going to actually work to act in the opposite direction of how this person behaves. So, you know, you look at one miserable person or one narcissistic fucking asshole or whatever you want to call them, and it's like, okay, there's one of you, but the effect that you're creating around you are, you know, 50, 100, thousands of people that you're interacting with. You're actually a huge teacher to all these people. And although you're sitting here trying to ruin everybody else's day, what you're actually doing is helping the collective by showing us how we don't want to behave, in turn allowing us to expand into a higher consciousness. So it's like, yeah, we'll take, you know, one asshole if we're going to get the elevation of like 1,000 people around that person.
Yeah, I mean, showing gratitude to all your teachers,
right?
Not to just the ones that you bucket into like, this is good for me, this is the light, but also to the ones that are bucketed into the bad is equally important. And you're right. There's, you know, that's a funny thing is when somebody triggers you, right? Because there's a little part of you that doesn't like that part of yourself, or is fearful of that, right? So it's like, you know, using that as a point of teaching. You see somebody lie, you see somebody cheat, you're like, you say, oh, I would never, how dare she, right? And just say, you know, this is a part of myself that I still hold in the shadow. Or maybe I have some shame around this. Like really look intrinsically rather than projecting it onto that person, but actually look at your whole situation and figure out where it comes from you. That's the skill we need to learn.
Well, that's the only place you really have any power anyways, because like you're not going to be able to do anything about anybody else. Like there's no point in trying. It is a total fucking waste of energy to try to control another person, to try to fully understand another person. Like you can't understand crazy. You can't. And I don't mean that as like an attack on like mental health, quote unquote crazy. Like I'm not using it like in that sense. I'm just like in people that are so disconnected from their impact on the people around them, and just like delusional with like whatever their story is and whatever they're doing. You can't understand it. You can't reason with those types of people because they're not living in an environment of reasoning or logic. It's like they're irrational. And for you to try to even understand them, you don't have to. We just need to be compassionate towards them. It's like replace, and I think Alok has talked about this a couple times. He's like a trans activist and poet and speaker, and they are absolutely incredible. Sorry, their pronouns are they, them. And they talk about, you don't need to understand me as a trans person. You just need to be compassionate that this is who I am. And you just need to respect that I'm asking you to use they, them pronouns. You don't need to understand. So drop comprehension and replace it with compassion. And if we can do that with the people around us that are also hyper triggering, or these friends or family or coworkers or whoever that are like acting in ways that we would never act. And it's like, fuck this person. You're fucking crazy. I can't believe you would fucking do that. No, it's just like, wow, I feel first and foremost disappointed that this is how this interaction is unfolding. And secondary to that, it saddens me that you are such a prisoner of your own experience right now, and that this is how you have to behave because you feel backed into a corner and your survival triggers are coming out. And in that space, especially me personally being who I am, like I would love nothing more but to just like sit with you in that and be like, you don't have to choose this. Like, this is a choice. And I think that people are so comfortable with giving their power away, and they're so trapped in their survival mechanisms, and they're self-soothing, and they're either running towards pleasure or running away from pain, that they're just stuck in this spot of like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. What is my go-to response? What is my impulsive fight or flight technique? And like, they don't realize that they're looping. They don't realize that in those moments, with a little meditation and a little shadow work and a little internal awareness, in every moment, they're at that 0 point of choice. And it's like, you have access to any energy in any moment. And when you're triggered, you can be like, oh my God, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to say this. I'm not going to respond this way. I'm not going to act this way. And then you can pull in a different energy, act on that, and you can create a new story. But like, people don't want to do that. There's also, those self-limiting beliefs, self-sabotage. It's very layered. But I find it so interesting to witness people that are stuck in those cycles, especially when there are people that are close to you, and you just want to shake them and be like, this is a choice. This is a choice you're making in every moment. And like, there's nothing I can do to stop that. I just need to be like, okay, those are the choices that you feel are best for you at this time. And that's fine. But I'm not going to be around to watch those choices be made because it's negatively affecting me and distracting me. And then that's when you get into like, is this a good investment of my time, of my energy, of my money, of my love, of my attention? And it's like, it's not. It's an energy leak. These are energy vampires. These are people that are probably fragmented, that have entity attachments. These are people that... And it's like, ooh, an entity. Like, no, babe, we all have entity attachments. It's like an energetic cold or flu. Like, you go talk to a Reiki master or whomever, they'll start clearing your shit. You can pull it off. You know what I mean? It's like, there's nothing to be scared of, but it's just like, baby girl, you got an entity attached. Like, let's clean that the fuck up. You know what I mean? Because you're destroying your own life.
Yeah, I find the metaphor of the entity to be very... when you tell somebody like an entity's on them, it's like, oh, it's like, as you think of like The Ring, you think of The Exorcist, it has its own like spirit, its own being, and like, it's just, you gotta be so careful with that. It's like, when I do energy work with people, I never say entity.
Oh my God, I would never tell somebody that's an entity attachment.
Yeah,
because immediately they're gonna think like, oh my God, I'm going to throw up green. My head's going to spin. I'm going to be like floating, like exorcism style.
Yeah, only like on ayahuasca normally.
Right? Yeah. Oh my God. If you want to sit with me in ayahuasca ceremony, I will pull all of that shit out. I go into like shaman breath work, like demon hunter. Like, yeah, that just started coming through the last couple sessions I've done with this like crazy, we talked about this actually a little bit. Yeah. Just crazy levels of I'm like taunting these like energies out of people, and it's like my head would just like, and then like within 5 or 6 seconds the person I was looking at would just start being like and I was like, I fucking knew it was coming over here. And I have all these little tools and crystals and this like feather wand thing. I'm like, oh, it was crazy. But yeah, that was a blast. I love doing that. Like, I'm wired for that. I'm here to literally pull the shit out of people. So I'm like, let me at it.
This is the most interesting part of this whole part of history, right? Because like, we're rediscovering these ancient ways of ayahuasca, of shamanism, of medicine. And we also have all these modern technologies
Right.
and modern modalities of healing work and all these other, like, it's like even the access that these ancient tribes had to these modalities of healing, they just didn't have all this information, right? So what happens when you blend the modern with the antiquity, like the classic, or I'm sorry, the ancient,
Right.
the modern application, the best technology, the best methodologies with the ancient practices of ayahuasca, of plant medicine in these healing contexts. I think that's what's kind of being leaned into, and the timing is right, because everyone and their mother's now heard about ayahuasca, as far as I know, right? And this is medicine that should not be played with, and yet we have like all these new modalities of healing that like kind of are, I don't know if they're being remembered, but they're definitely being enhanced by all the information technology available to us. So where this all goes, I have no idea.
It also like waters down the experience of it. And I think there was some bullshit that I read, or I don't know how accurate it was, but it was like at any given weekend in Los Angeles, there's like 120 ayahuasca ceremonies taking place at one time or something like that. Like, which I would believe.
I believe it for
Absolutely.
sure. Yeah.
And the idea, and I've sat with like trained medicine woman, like, you know, trained in the Amazon, like worked with the whole tribes, the medicine, like this woman knows what she's doing. And to imagine that there's 120 of her floating around Los Angeles, like that's like a kimono wearing, big hat gal or guy who's just sitting there trying to do their thing. And I think that A, that's fucking dangerous. B, I don't think that anybody there is receiving proper like support for integration, which is super fucking dangerous. And I also, I don't know if we need technology with everything. I don't know if we need to work in like projected energy, 3D, whatever. It's like sometimes we need to just get back to basics and be like, no, babe, you just need to be in a dark tent in the middle of the Amazon, high as shit on ayahuasca, and you need to sit with grandmother and see what she's going to say to you. And like, so yeah, I think like at the studio space that we're opening here in Lisbon, by all means, like I want that meditation with projections, and I want the room color coordinated with like the heart chakra and all of the technology. I think there's a time and a place for it, and I think it really adds something in a lot of ways, for sure. But I think there's certain things that's just like, sometimes you just need a medicine woman and a treehouse, and that's all you need. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. And I see like ayahuasca as technology.
Totally.
Like it is an embedded spirit into this medicine that goes through and pulls out everything you need to be addressed. And every single breath is a new experience. That is high technology. It's more so like the information that we all have available to us. Like,
Right.
Think about it. Right now, every single healer that you mentioned on this podcast, somebody can open up and go deep into their work.
Totally.
The fact that all that shit is just readily available and you have the world's entire genius sitting in your pocket,
It's mind-blowing.
it's fucking mind-blowing. So like we have all these ancient like healing methodologies coming back. You have all this new information. It's like, what excuse do we have not to do the work at this point?
You don't. And this is what I'm getting to when I'm in relationship with, it doesn't even need to be romantic relationship, but when I'm in relationship with either friends or coworkers or lovers or family or whatever, and I'm sitting there watching people try to excuse their behavior as like, this is just who I am, or like, I don't really want to do it, but I want to be in connection with you, or like we're cycling through like similar self-sabotaging experiences or whatever. It's just like, I need this job done. Why isn't it done? Oh, you're having a struggle of some kind. Totally get it. Ask me for help. I will point you in the right direction. Oh, I want to be, you know, in connection with you, and you have some impulsive behavior, or this person can't control their anger or whatever. It's like, there's no fucking excuse to not be doing the work. These people are choosing, again, back to this 0-point choice moment of like, you are choosing to behave like this. You are choosing to keep yourself asleep. You are choosing to willfully stay stuck in this moment. And it's just like, light and love to everybody, but I am fucking done with trying to convince people to get help or trying to point people or trying to push people in the right direction. And at this point in my life, I'm just going to keep hacking my way through my own trail. And if other people see me and they want to hop on and walk behind me, you are so fucking welcome. And I will look back and give you whatever advice I can. But like, I'm not pulling people onto my trail anymore. I'm not tying myself to people and trying to convince them. It's just like, if you don't want to change, then don't fucking change. And I still love you. But you're not going to be seated at my table. I still want you to eat, but like go over there and eat, because it's just like, you're just not welcome here because you're an energy leak and you're a fucking distraction and it's too much. And I don't have time for the fucking excuses, because give me your sob story. I've fucking been there. We don't need to get into my traumas or my childhood or like the shit that nobody fucking knows. But it's just like, there's nothing you're going to say that's going to shock me. And there's nothing that's going to say that I'm going to be like, oh, you really one-upped me. It's like, no, babe, we're all going through our shit. And like, I have some dark shit that I would love to talk about if people want to hear about it. But it's just like, my point is, if I'm where I'm at after what I've gone through, what is your fucking excuse? You're just fucking lazy, or you prefer to be a victim. Because when you're a victim, it's external. You're like, oh, I just can't because I'm a victim. It's like, okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's like going through the jungle, like hacking through this shit together. It's like we're all on this fucking journey together. It's like, get with the party or get the fuck out of the way.
Literally.
There we go.
Get the fuck out of the way.
All right. I think it's a good point to end it. Peace and love to you all.
That.
Thank you, brother.
You're welcome.
One last question. Where can people find you?
Yeah, people can find me if you just put my name, Chris Corsini, into Instagram. It'll pop up. Make sure it's a verified account, because there's a lot of scammers out there. On YouTube, same thing, Chris Corsini. My website is inwardboutique.com, and that has all of our resources. I also have a podcast called Middle Ground that I will bring you boys onto, and we can chat over there a little bit, because yeah, we're going to definitely have to reconnect and talk more. My music is Middle Child. I'm a middle child. It's spelled MDL space CHLD. And yeah, find me everywhere. It's great. It's good content.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for the work that you're doing, the path of service that you're walking, and for giving people the invitation to and the permission to just live their full human experience. Much appreciated.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate you guys too. Good work with what you guys are doing. So let's figure out how to take this somewhere else. Absolutely. Okay.
Peace and love, y'all.
Ciao.